I cannot make a significant difference in this world.
And I refuse to believe that my actions can impact the lives of those around me.
I know without a doubt that God has not given me anything to offer.
It's foolish to think that what I do with my time and resources matters.
I possess something the world needs is a lie.
My life is of little consequence.
All of this is true unless I allow God to reverse my thinking.
My life is of little consequence is a lie. I possess something the world needs.
What I do with my time and resources matters.
It is foolish to think that God has not given me anything to offer.
I know without a doubt that my actions can impact the lives of those around me.
And I refuse to believe that I cannot make a significant difference in this world.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Hey, if we haven't met, my name is Don. My wife Diane and I, we serve on the Dream Team here at the church. And man, we just hope you had an incredible week, this Thanksgiving week. Maybe some time off work, right? Some time off work. A little bit too much turkey on Thursday. Spent too much money on Friday. Watched about 3/4 too much of football on Saturday, right? And it's Sunday. We're in the house. I'm excited to bring you the word. I hope you're glad to be here. I know you are because I heard you sing. But we're wrapping up week 4 of a series that we call Be Rich. And I've enjoyed it. I've got a lot out of it. But as we wrap up, if you're just sliding in, maybe this is your first week, I want to lay some groundwork. I want to lay a foundation because it's really important that we capture what we learned in week 1. And if you weren't here, we learned in week 1, y'all sitting, this is good, we are rich. Good news? Amen. Let's all go shopping. We're rich. You may not feel rich, but being rich and feeling rich can be easily confused. Let me prove it to you. You can go to globalrichlist.com, type in your income, hit submit, and you'll find out where you rank in the scope of the entire world. And if your income is $33,400, I think is the number. I did it, $33,400. You're the top 1.00% of wage earners in the entire world. At $32,400 a year, you're a top 1%er. You are richer than 99% of the globe. And with this wealth comes some rich people opportunities. We also heard some bad news on week 1. Good news is we're rich. Bad news is we're rich. And with that becomes we got some rich people problems. We've got some living loaded issues. And one of those biggest problems that we have to deal with wealth. And again, don't check out. I just told you, we are all rich. You don't feel it, but we are rich. One of the greatest issues we've got to contend with is it can be difficult to depend on God when we have wealth. We think we've done pretty good. And then we learned in week 2 about the deceitfulness of wealth. If you love money, you're never going to have enough. That rich line just keeps on moving, and it keeps on moving. In week 3, we talked about intentional generosity. And we're going to close it out this week. I want to close it out with a key thought. And here's the key thought. How we spend our time and our money show what we value the most. How we invest our time, how we invest our money reflect what we value in our heart. And money is a funny thing. It is. It's just like, it's these dirty little pieces of paper, right? It's these dirty little you don't even want to know where some of these bills have been. And these stamped little pieces of metal. And the only reason we collect and pursue these pieces of paper and these little pieces of metal, because in our culture, we can trade these papers for other things that we value, right? Bigger things, shinier things, faster things, things that are better than our neighbors' things, all that stuff, right? Jesus, I've heard this said, and I think this is true. You can tell a person's priorities by looking in their checkbook. And if you're under 22, you're Googling checkbook right now. We used to carry those things around. Some still do. It's okay. Jesus said it this way. He said, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. He said that 2,000 years ago, and that's ever so true today. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So now that we got the good news, we're rich, we're loaded, now we're going to learn how to be rich the right way. Because if we're not careful, it's really easy to be rich the wrong way. And we're going to get into Luke chapter 12, 12th chapter of Luke. So if you brought your Bible, you can turn to it now, power it up. We're going to project everything on the screen. And that's exactly what happened to a man that Jesus told the story of in Luke chapter 12. And let me set it up this way. In chapter 12, verse 1, there were many, many thousands had gathered. Jesus was teaching, and he had his disciples with him. And many, many, many thousands had gathered. And it even says that they were trampling over one another to get a little closer. It was like a 1992 Green Day concert, right? I mean, it was nuts. There were thousands of people. They're crowd surfing. And Jesus is teaching. And he's teaching about the kingdom of heaven and all these great things. And we're going to pick up in verse 13, where a man sees his opportunity to make his request to Jesus. And it says this in verse 13. Someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Jesus replied, "Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbitrator between you?" Then he said to them, he said, "Watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. There's more to life than life. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions." Jesus knew no matter what answer he gave to the brother, there was no answer he can give that was going to settle their family dispute, because he saw the deeper issue. The issue wasn't who had what. The bigger issue was the greed in the hearts of the brothers. So Jesus did what he did, and he illustrated, and he taught in what's called a parable. And there's a lot of incredible parables recorded in the Bible, and you should really get into them. They're typically in a parable, there's one character that represents you. It represents me. It represents the audience that Jesus was talking to. And then there's a second character that represents God or heaven. And so a parable is a made-up story. This actually never happened, but Jesus told this parable to illustrate the point because he saw deeper. So he told them this parable: the ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. So they're pulling out tissues. You already got to feel bad for the man in the story. He's a rich man. He's getting richer, right? So he's a rich man. The ground of a certain rich man, he yielded an abundant harvest. He had a big year. So he thought to himself, "What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops." Then he said, "This is what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns, and I'm going to build bigger ones. And there I'm going to store my surplus, my extra grain. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat the leftover turkey, drink some sparkling juice, and be merry." And if the story ended right there, we could, Diane, bring Braden, Nevaeh. Jesus is telling us a story about how to save for the future. This feels kind of Ramsey approved to me, right? He's a rich man. He's wealthy. And by the way, again, don't check out. You're rich. We are in the rich category. There's a rich man, and he was blessed. His bank accounts were full. So he decided, I'm going to open up another bank account. I'm going to knock down my barns, and I'm going to build bigger barns. But there was a bigger issue here. And the issue wasn't his financial security. It wasn't monetary gains. The issue was the greed in the heart of the man. If you look at those last three verses, this is your English lesson. Look at how many personal pronouns were used in that. My man had a bad case of me, myself, and I. Everything is, I will do this, I will do this. He didn't give credit to where the blessing came from. God can't fill you with himself if you're already full of yourself. God can't fill you with himself if you're already full of yourself. And I'm going to brag on my wife for a second because she's brag-worthy and she's here also, and Christmas is coming up, and she's good. But that's one of her favorite prayers. I've heard it. We've been together over 20 years, and I've heard it so much out of her mouth. Lord, empty me of me and fill me with you. God can't fill us with himself if we're already full of ourselves. So in this parable, we've been introduced to one character, the rich man. He had a great year. He decided, I'm going to build bigger barns and I'm going to go golf. But God said to him, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who's going to get all the stuff that you've prepared for yourself? This is how it'll be for whoever stores up things for themselves, whoever's rich towards self, but is not rich towards God. I got to tell you, this parable messed me up a little bit. We are in the rich category. I had to buy more life insurance after reading this thing. It took a minute until I could really get to the heart of what Jesus was getting to. I own a business, and by most standards, it'd be considered a successful business, and I really had to chew on this for a little while. The issue isn't that the man was wealthy. Look at the beginning of the parable. It says, the ground of a certain rich man. He wasn't a fool because he was rich. He started out a rich man. I think Jesus included that for a reason. He wasn't a fool because he was rich. The issue was the man's assumption. His assumption was that all this extra wealth was for his own consumption. His assumption was all this wealth, it was for his own consumption. The danger's not in the stuff that we collect or the substance that's collected, but the heart that can be infected with greed and self-dependency that comes from wealth. Look at verse 15. Jesus made it clear. We don't have to bust out the big books and get into the Hebrew and Greek. It's really clear. Verse 15 says this. It says, watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. There is more to this life than this life. If we're only satisfied with the things that money can buy, we risk losing those things that money can't buy. And those are some of the greatest things. If we're only satisfied, if our only satisfaction comes from the wealth accumulated, it should come from appreciation, not accumulation. Appreciation for what God has done. There was a wise man, and his name was Biggie Smalls, and he said, "Mo money, mo problems," right? See, a few of y'all know it. Mo money, mo problems. He might have had some bad theology in his day, but he nailed this one. And it's not even the money that's the issue. It's not even the possessions. But it's when we put the possessions in front of the praise. The money's not an issue. The man was rich at the beginning of the parable. The issue is that the man in this parable, he was rich towards self. He wasn't rich towards God. So how do you become rich towards God? And that's going to take us to the theme verse that we've been going throughout this Be Rich series. And it comes from 1 Timothy chapter 6. And the Apostle Paul is writing a letter to a young preacher named Timothy. And he's leading a church, a first century church. It's just rocking, it's blowing up. And there's some rich people in the crowd. So Paul wants to tell them how to deal with you, how to deal with the rich people. So he says this. He said, command those who are rich in this present world. He says command. He doesn't say you might want to mention. It'd be a decent idea if you get a chance. You might want to. He said command those who are rich not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain. Housing drop of 2009, Hurricane Harvey. Command those who are rich not to be arrogant. Don't put your hope in wealth, but instead put your hope in God. Not in the provision, but in He who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. I love that. God has blessed us so we can be a blessing. Jesus said one time, sell all your stuff and give it away. Some of the wealthiest people that ever walked on this planet are some of the characters that we read about in the Bible. The money isn't the issue. It's an issue of the heart. It's an issue of the greed. Then he says this. He said, command them to do good. So how do we do it? What do we do? Command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. In this way, they will lay up treasure for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age. He's talking about heaven. He's talking about eternity. Lay up treasure in heaven so that they may take hold of life that's truly life. Command them to do good and to be rich in good deeds. To be rich towards God, we must be rich in deeds. If you're taking notes, write down the word deeds. Deeds. The world is getting, maybe you've noticed this, it's getting increasingly hostile towards things of God. We get home on a Sunday afternoon and turn on the news and hear about a church shooting. The world is getting hostile towards things of God, but also it's obvious to me that our culture is getting skeptical of not only Christianity, but Christians themselves. There's an author, his name is Brennan Manning. He wrote a book with a strange title called The Ragamuffin Gospel, but it's a great book. He wrote this, and when I read this, I couldn't shake it. He wrote this. He said, the greatest single cause of atheism in the world, it's not science teachers in the public schools. It's not liberal politicians. He wrote, the greatest reason for atheism in the world today are Christians who come into a room like this, who acknowledge Jesus with their lips, but they walk out those doors and deny Him by their lifestyle. And then he goes on and he concludes, he said, and this is what an unbelieving world simply finds unbelievable. This is what an unbelieving world simply finds unbelievable. Church, we are called to live out a response. We're called to live out action, deeds, works to the grace that God has given us. In James it says that our faith is dead without works, without deeds. We're not saved by our good works. We can't be gooderist enough, right? We're saved by Jesus and the cross alone. But even though we're not saved by our good works, we can't be good enough. We are saved for good works. Peter said this. Peter wrote this in 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 12. I love this. He said, be careful how you behave among your unsaved neighbors. For then, even if they're suspicious of you, even if they can't quite understand you, if they can't quite make you out, even if they talk against you, they'll end up praising God for your good works when Christ returns. Your neighbors, your coworkers, the people that we come across throughout the week, they may not necessarily share our faith and our beliefs, but they can't deny the way you live your life. Acquire the Fire, 1999, Pontiac Silverdome. Anybody else there? Anybody? Yeah? We got some, okay, I see some hands up. 1999, it was April 1999. Diane and I, we took a group of teenagers to the Pontiac Silverdome for Acquire the Fire. This was their first stadium event. It was huge. There were 80,000 teenagers packed in this place. That's crazy. I mean, it's floor to ceiling, wall to wall. Every seat, back when they had seats in a roof, was filled. There were 80,000 teenagers in this place, the biggest event Acquire the Fire ever had. And I still remember a moment, and I can't shake this. Ron Luce, who's the founder of Acquire the Fire, he started what seemed to be like a war chant. And there were 80,000 teenagers chanting this, and he said this, he said, a relentless pursuit of God, a relentless pursuit of the people He loves, a relentless pursuit of God, a relentless pursuit of the people He loves. And it's like we did this for 2 hours. We blew the roof off that place. That's why it looks the way it does now, I think. I mean, it was good till then. It was incredible. 80,000 teenagers. A relentless pursuit of God. And a relentless pursuit of the people He loves. We are all God's kids. Some of us, we just don't know it yet. Being generous to God, being rich towards God is being generous to God, and it's being generous to His kids. If you want to bless me, be good to my kids. If you want to be good to me, be good to my kids. If you want to bless God, bless His kids. Generosity. If you're taking notes, write that down. Generosity. Generosity. Rich in generosity. If you're visiting, Maybe this is your first time here, or maybe you're skeptical because there's some experience in your past that leads you to believe that the church wants your money. I want to assure you we're not going to take a special offering. You can take your hand off the wallet. God doesn't need your money. He doesn't need your dirty papers. I do believe that Jesus understands the connection between our money and our heart. That's why he said, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. But there's so much more to generosity than your money. Your time. He desires that we desire him. He just doesn't need your dollars. He doesn't just need your money. He wants your heart. He desires that we desire him. Proverbs chapter 11 says this. I love this. The world of the generous gets larger and larger. The world of the stingy gets smaller and smaller. How true is that? The one who blesses others is abundantly blessed. And those who help others, they're helped. Church, we need to lead the way in crazy generosity. When you leave this place and you go to your restaurant and you go get lunch, I hope you leave the biggest, fattest tip out there. We need to lead the way in generosity. And the church crowd isn't necessarily known for leaving their incredible tips. Okay? Leave the $1.68 behind. Let's bless somebody. We are rich. We've been given more than we need. Let's bless somebody. Remember, where you invest your time, where you invest your dollar, reflect what you value in your heart. Let me ask you, are you spending time with God? Just you and him. Not just when mom's sick or the checkbook's low, but are you investing time with God? Are you investing time in the local church? We believe that the local church is the hope of the world, and God is doing some of the greatest things in and through the local church. You can't fully appreciate something unless you're fully invested. You can't appreciate it unless you're invested. Have you found a way to use your talents, to use your gifts, to serve? I've heard people tell me that I don't have to be part of the church to love God. I can love God and I don't have to be a part of the church. And that might be true. We can't, that's between God and them. But in my opinion, I don't think we can be completely obedient to Christ apart from the church. I think, in my opinion, saying that you love God but don't need the church is kind of like saying, I'm the biggest Lions fan in the world, but I've never watched a game. I love NASCAR, but I'll never watch a race. Plug into the church. God is doing some of his greatest work in and through the church. To be rich towards God is to bless God and to bless his kids. Relationships. That's our last point. Relationships. Deeds, generosity, relationships. Rich relationships. In John chapter 13, this has been almost a life verse for me in the past year. This particular verse has hit home with me so hard in the past 8, 9, 10 months. I've probably shared it with some of you out here. John 13:34, these are Jesus' words. He said, a new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. And by your love, by this, say by this, everyone will know that you are my disciple. By your love, they will know that you belong to me. Not by your giving record, not by your church attendance, not by the music you listen to, but by your love, they will know that you are my disciple. By your love, if you love one another. And then in Matthew 22, Jesus was posed with a question. And we got to have ears to hear this one. This is good. Somebody asked Jesus, teacher, there were 600 plus Jewish rules to follow. What is the greatest commandment in the law? What is the greatest? What's the main thing? If I can keep the main thing, if I can do one thing, what's most important? Jesus. And Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the first and the greatest commandment. And the second is like this: love your neighbor as yourself. Love God, love people. Pursue God, pursue his people. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and love your neighbor. All the laws of the prophets hang on these two commandments. We believe around here that life change happens in context of relationships. We believe that so much, guess what? We invest our time and our money because it's of great value here. And we do that. One way that we do that is through city groups. We just ended up our fall semester, and we had 15 groups meeting all over the city, all over the county, all over surrounding counties. We believe that some of the best friends that you've never met yet are waiting to meet you in a city group. And I can tell you that Diane and I, we've met some of our greatest friends over the past year in a city group. It allows you to let the mask down and make some real relationships, to pray for each other. We've met some of our greatest prayer warriors as we went through some stuff this year. They've prayed for us, we've prayed for them. Relationships. To be rich towards God starts with real relationships. It starts with intentional generosity. It starts with using the gifts that God has given you in serving those people around you. If we can project on the screen, we've been working on something during this Be Rich series, and let's see if we can do this together. Let's see how we can do this. 11 o'clock crowd, let's see how we can do this. Let's read it together. God has blessed me with more than I need. I am rich. I will not trust in riches, but in him who richly provides. Because I have more, I can make an eternal difference in the life of others. Amen. Amen. Would you stand up as we close?